Hi, and welcome to Edulastic. Thank you for choosing us. We need to get started by creating an account. We can do that by going to edulastic.com and clicking Join for Free at the top right. From Join for Free, we need to choose as Teacher. When you get to the sign up page, choose any of the single sign on methods provided or create your account from scratch. Once you've entered in your information, you could choose to search by your school, request a new school if you can't find it, or choose I want to homeschool. Please note that joining your school community is a very important step. Your school community is where your data will be stored and will allow you to collaborate with your colleagues, including sharing or allowing a co-teacher to access your class. I'll go ahead and choose my school here. Now that I've chosen my school, I need to select the grade, subjects, and standard sets. Now, I successfully created my account for the first time, and I'm ready to begin using Edulastic. When you are on Edulastic, you have many help features available to you. Over on the left side in the gray navigation bar, you have a question mark icon, and this will be considered our help center, which will give you a whole host of articles, and you could search by a particular keyword. Over on the right side, we have our chat icon. You could use the chat icon to begin a conversation with our support team to ask any kind of question you want. Back on edulastic.com, you'll find our resources page. This is where you can find our Teacher Training Hub resources. This will include things like our YouTube channel, our Help Center, and our guide for new users. As we scroll down, you'll also find our self-paced training courses. This only shows 3, but once you click into it, you'll find many more courses, including our Edulastic certified courses. Scrolling down further, you'll see some information about live training, advanced training options, and there's our certified Edulastic professional training course. And we have even built a training kit so you could present Edulastic to your staff. Scroll down to the bottom, you will find our tech support number here. This is available from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's take a look at our gray navigation bar. This is where you're going to have quick access to any of the features you need on Edulastic. Your Assignments tab is where you'll go to find your live class board. Your live class board is where you get the data as the students are taking the assessment. Your gradebook is where you'll get a list of all of your assessments and the grades that the students got. This will be the easiest way to get student test results to be able to post them in your district gradebook. The skill report will have mostly premium reports, but there will be one free report called Standards Gradebook. This will be a cumulative standards-based gradebook, which will show you how they've done across multiple standards and across multiple assessments. The item bank is where you'll find our 130,000 plus items. You will be able to create items and assessments in this tab. The test library is where you can create a test or find pre-made tests. The playlist library is where you can organize your assessments. In the playlist, you can create modules that will allow you to assign assessments in a particular order that you choose. And Manage Class is where we can manage our rosters. In Manage Class, we can edit or create new classes, and we can also manage our rosters, whether we're adding more students, removing students, or even changing passwords. Let's go ahead and create a class. I can choose to create a new class, or I can sync with Google Classroom. If you have a district or school-wide subscription, you might already have Clever classes synced. I'll go ahead and sync with Google Classroom. When I click on Sync with Google Classroom, I need to choose my account. Once I've chosen my account, I'll go ahead and select the appropriate class. I'll choose my standard set, and I will import. It's important that you fill out the grade and subject if it's not already pre-populated. This information will help with your standards tracking. I'll go ahead and import. Now that I have imported this class, you'll notice all 10 students were added. I can click into that class To begin managing my roster, because the Google Classroom sync is a manual sync, it's important that you click the Sync with Google Classroom anytime you have a roster change on Google Classroom. This will resync your roster into Edulastic and make sure that the roster is as up to date as possible. While I'm taking a look at this class, you can also choose to add co-teachers. Now, this should have happened automatically if I did a Google Classroom sync with a co-teacher in it. However, you can always choose to add more if needed. The co-teacher will be able to manage your roster, assign assessments to your roster, and look at the data. This will be especially helpful for intervention specialists who don't need their own class but does need the data from Edulastic. Now I'll go back to Manage Class. I'll create a class manually. I'll click on Create Class and begin filling out the details. You could choose to add a tag if you wish. The tag will be especially helpful for Edulastic Enterprise users as this will help admin find your class and look at the data. I'll go ahead and save my class. Now that I've saved my class, I can choose to add multiple students. From Add Multiple Students, premium users will have the ability to search existing students and add them. You can search by their student name or their email. You can also use Add Multiple Students and choose to use Google usernames, Office 365 usernames, first name and last name, or last name and first name. If your students have emails, it is highly suggested that you use the Google or Office 365 usernames. When you use the first name and last name option or the last name and first name option, this creates a generic account. This means that if another teacher has already added that student using first name and last name, that student will now have two different logins. To avoid this issue, go to our YouTube channel and look up rostering using the class code. That will make sure students with emails can sign up to your class without creating a duplicate account. I'll go ahead and add some students here so we have a roster to manage. Now that I've created these accounts, I'll go ahead and click Done. At this point, I have a few different management options available to me. If you find that any of the information was incorrect in your class, you can choose the three dots at the top right. Here, you will be able to edit any of the class information. You can also choose to archive the class. Archiving does not delete the data, it just takes it off of your dashboard if you do not need to assign any more assessments to that class. If I click on a student, I can choose Actions and then edit the student information. This will give me some additional details where I can fill out their information like an SISID, whether they're free and reduced lunch, or if they're an English language learner. I can also choose the student, click Actions, and remove the student or reset their password if needed. Premium users will have the ability to enable text-to-speech or add them to a report group. When I add a student to a group, I can use this group for filtering reports or assigning assessments. I'll go ahead and add this student to a group. Now I can select from a pre-existing group or add a new group. You'll notice that creating a group is just like creating a class. I'll go ahead and fill in my information now. Now that I've filled out my information, I'll simply click the Save button, and I will get my confirmation that the group has been created and the student has been enrolled. As mentioned previously, I have the ability to assign to that group or filter my reports by that group. It's important to note that if you want the data to follow the student from one group to the next, that you need to continue assigning to your classes. As long as I assign the assessment to Algebra 3 Period 2 Kindle, I will be able to see the data for this student, whether he is in on level or below level. However, if I were to assign to the group of on level, the data sticks to that group. This means that the data will not follow that student from an on level group to a basic level group. To learn more about groups, make sure to check out our help article on creating student groups. Now that I've created my classes, I can move to either the test library to find our pre-made assessments, or to the item bank if I want to create a more customized assessment based on the items I choose. From the item bank, I have some filters here that I can select. I'll go ahead and select a 5th grade math filter. At this point, I can choose my standard set, and I'll go ahead and choose Common Core. Once I've chosen my standard set, I can choose to narrow it down even further by going to Standards and clicking on the box here. This will allow me to select a particular standard so I can create an assessment based on that standard. With 72 questions, I might even decide to go to Collections and look up my school library, district library, or Edulastic certified. The school and district library is if there are other teachers using Edulastic and they're sharing that content to those particular libraries. I'll go ahead and choose Edulastic Certified here, and you'll see I have 40 questions. The Edulastic Certified is our vetted content. This will include the different state tests, as well as different assessment companies like Engage New York. I also have some additional filters down here, but do keep in mind that the more filters you choose, the less items that you will have available. With 40 items here, I have plenty to choose from. I'll go ahead and begin viewing these items to determine the best items for my assessment. I'll click on the View button next to this item. This will show me a preview of the item. This allows me to see the item from the student perspective. I can choose to add it to the test if I'm ready, or click the Next button to move to the next item. I'll go ahead and add this item to the test. You'll see that the New Test button up here now says 1. That's letting me know that I have assigned one item to this test. I can choose to add a few more simply by clicking the plus sign. ELA teachers will have it slightly different because they have passage-based items which will contain multiple questions within it. These teachers will have the option to choose all of the questions on that passage-based item or select individual questions. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that's done. I'll scroll up to the top and clear all my filters. Then I'll choose my ELA subjects. Now that I've chosen my first 4 filters, I can choose to use Edulastic Certified, just like before. You'll also want to consider using the question type filter. This will make sure that you can choose passage with questions. That way you do not get items without a passage attached. As mentioned previously, I can choose to add the entire item at once by clicking the plus button and selecting Yes Add All. If I want to select individual items within that passage, I can choose No I'll Select. Once I do that, I'll simply click on the number I want to look at and then add it to test. Once I click that, move to the next question. Decide if you want to use that and add that one to the passage. In this case, I'll click on number 3, decide I don't want it, and skip to number 4 and decide I don't want that either. When I exit out, you'll now see that I have 6 items on my test. For this particular test, I want to focus on just math, so I'll go ahead and take away those items. Now that I've added 4 items, I want to also create my own item. I can click the New Item button here. From New Item, I can choose from any of these different item type buckets. I'll go ahead and choose multiple choice here, and you'll find that all of the item types follow a similar pattern. You first add the question, then the choices, and then the correct answer. If you want to learn more about that particular item, you can choose the How to Author button, and this will bring up a video showing you how to author that item. Once you're done creating that item, you would move to preview mode to see it from the student perspective. Then choose metadata to add in your standards as necessary. You would finish up by clicking the Publish button, and this would make this item available for assessment use. Now that I have added my items, I'll go ahead and click New Test. From New Test, you'll see a familiar look from the item creation. It's giving us some tags that we need to follow like a book, left to right. I'll go ahead and fill out my class descriptions, and you'll see that it asks me to fill out my test name, an optional description field if you want other teachers to know what this assessment is about, and an optional tag field, which would allow you to tag it to a topic so teachers can find this assessment without searching a particular standard. Now that I've filled out my information, I can move to add items, which would allow me to add more items if I wish. In this case, I've already added 4 and I'll just skip to review. From review, I can view a student, which will allow me to see the assessment from the student perspective. I also have the ability to quickly remove items. I can click on the trash can or click on the box to the left of the item and choose Remove Selected. I can move items easily by clicking on the 3 lines and dragging to its appropriate place. You can also select and choose Move To if needed. The Expand Rows will show the answer key for these items, allowing me to check the answer key for accuracy. Once I'm done reviewing the assessment, I can move to Settings. Settings is for premium users and will give me several additional options on how I want to assign this assessment. Let's go ahead and look at the options that are available in Test Settings. The first option is our test type. Here, we could choose between class assessment and practice if we're a teacher. Admin will have the ability to choose a common assessment. Common assessment will allow the admin to freeze the settings marked here so teachers cannot override those settings, and the assessment will be common and consistent across all of the classes that are assigned that assessment. In both class and practice assessments, the assessment will be scored and students will get the results. However, a practice assessment can be filtered out. This test type would be great if you're assigning homework or pre-test to students and you don't want the data to affect the gradebook or reports. Maximum attempts allowed determines how many times the students can take this test. Right now, I say the students can only take this test once. However, if I did a practice assessment and maybe it was a homework assignment, I might consider giving them more than one attempts. This way they can see how they did and go back and fix their work. Test instructions will show up on the student side. They'll see the test on their dashboard, and when they click Start Test, it will show them these directions. Then, it will ask them are they sure they want to continue, and they'll click Yes to begin the test. Mark as Done will give you the options between automatically and manually. It will automatically be marked as done when the assessment closes and there are no gradable responses left. This means that every item has been graded. However, this could lead to future confusion if students did not take the test and the assessment has closed. Because there's nothing to grade, it will mark the status as done even if not all the students have finished the test. If you're in Edulastic regularly, you might consider doing manually. This will allow you full control over when that assessment is marked as done. This way, you could status track and determine if the assessment really is done, meaning no more students need access to that test. Release scores will determine if the students will see their scores. This happens after the student clicks the Submit button. You have 4 different options here. You can choose to not release the scores at all. You can also choose to release only the scores, and this means that the student will see they got a 75, but no other information. Release scores and student responses will show the students how they did and show what their response was. And finally, release scores, student responses, and correct answers will show them everything. This will allow them to see how they did on a particular question, what that question was and their response, as well as the correct answer. Moving on from release scores, We have some security features, like the Safe Exam Browser and Kiosk Mode. This option will require the students to either use Safe Exam Browser or Kiosk Mode, and both of these are controlled by the district and must be on managed devices. Safe Exam Browser will only work on Windows, Macs, or iPads. Kiosk Mode will only work on Chromebooks. Again, in both cases, these need to be pushed out at the district level. Safe Exam Browser and Kiosk Mode are designed to keep students within the Edulastic browser. This will keep them from going to Google to look up answers or to access things like calculators if they're not supposed to. We have shuffle questions and shuffle answer choices. Both of these options affect how the students see the assessment. When you set the order of the questions originally, that's how your data will appear, regardless of what number the student sees. This means if you set the assessment where your question number 1 is shuffled and it becomes number 10 on a student's assessment, that data will still show up as number 1 within your data. This will make sure that students cannot look at each other's screens to copy off of each other. We also have Show Calculator. Show Calculator will give students the option to use a calculator while on the test. This does give the calculator for all of the questions, so keep that in mind if you only want to use a calculator for 1 or 2 questions on the test. Right now, I only have Basic Calculator, but there will be additional options that will be Graphing and Scientific, and both of those calculators will be Desmos. This will allow you to use the Desmos calculator right within Edulastic. Answer on paper will allow you to mark the assessment as closed and will give you the option to manually grade the students or put in their responses if needed. Requiring password is another security feature. This will make sure that students only access the assessment when they're supposed to. You have a couple of options. You could choose between dynamic password, which will create a generic password that will work for a specified amount of time. This password will be different for each class period it is assigned to. This will also require that you manually open the assessment, and that's because you're deciding when that 15 minutes should start. This is the most secure type of password. We also have the static password, which would allow you to open the assessment automatically. The static password could be anything you want it to be, but it would stay consistent from one class to the next, becoming less secure as the day continues. Check answer tries per question. This will allow the students to answer the question and then check their answer. This will give the students multiple attempts on that particular question while they're still taking the assessment. This is best used on practice tests, like giving a homework assignment, and should not be used on common assessments or benchmark assessments. Also consider the item types on the assessment. If you're using a true and false question, you don't want to give students multiple attempts, because if they got it wrong, they know there's only one other option. Try to do something with a fill in the blank or a constructed response to make sure that students can't just select between different options until they get it correct. The evaluation method is how those items are graded. You can choose all or nothing, which follows most of the state test. You can give partial credit, and you can give partial credit that does not penalize for incorrect selections. The difference between the two is partial credit will count off if a student gets an answer incorrect. This means if a student is supposed to choose 2 answers and they choose one correct and one incorrect, they'll actually get a 0 because they got 1 point for correct and taken away 1 point for incorrect. If you say don't penalize, then they would get half credit because it does not take off for that incorrect answer. However, keep in mind if they're not being penalized, this could mean that they could select all of the options and they would get 100% for choosing all of the right answers. This is able to manually be regraded, so on the off chance a student does that, you do have the option to change their score for them. And last but not least is consider item level evaluation. This is set up during the multi-part item type. This would allow you to determine if a multi-part is counted as one item or each individual part is counted as an item. Again, that is set up during the item creation piece of a multi-part item. timed test will allow you to set a time limit for the test. And this is good for students that are taking the assessment at home to make sure they're not using outside resources if you can't use things like Safe Exam Browser or kiosk mode. The time defaults to the amount of questions there are, so feel free to change that to whatever number feels appropriate. You can also choose to allow students to save and continue later, and this will make it where they can save it and it does not count against their time for however long they're gone. This is especially useful if the students are in your class, as students might need to go to the office or go to the bathroom, and this will allow them to save and not lose out on any time on that assessment. As I scroll up to the top, I can click on Show Advanced Options and Student Player Skin, and this will take me to the ability to change how the assessment looks to the students. Whether I'm using the typical Edulastic test visuals, or if I want to use my specific state test platform, like TestNav for example. You can also decide if students should get a magnifier, which would allow students to zoom in on specific pieces of any item type. You can also choose to enable the scratch pad here, and the scratch pad would be enabled for all of the items. Once you're done choosing those settings, check out these features at the top. You have the ability to print the assessment if you want to give it on paper. You also have the ability to share this assessment. However, it's important to note that when you share the assessment, you'll need to first publish the assessment. You also have the ability to save as draft, which would allow you to save this and come back to it later to make any edits as necessary. If you're comfortable with the test, but you're not ready to assign it, go ahead and click Publish. And if you're ready to go ahead and assign this to students now, whether you're assigning it today or if you're assigning it a week from now, you can choose the Assign button and set the date as necessary. In this case, I'll go ahead and click Publish, and I'll find this in the test library. From Publish, you'll see my shared options now appear. I can click on the Edit button, and I can choose if I want to share it with my district, my school, or individuals by searching by their name or their email. Premium users will have the ability to add co-authors. Co-authors will have this option here, and that's can edit, add, or remove items. This would allow the co-author to make any edits necessary on the test. This would even give co-authors the ability to edit my own personally created items if I need someone to go in there and double check my work. Again, that's only available for premium users. Now that I've published this assessment, I can find it in the test library. The test library is similar to the item bank, but this time it's for assessments rather than individual items. I can go to the entire library to find our over 4,000 assessments, and I can use the filters just like I did in the item bank. Here, I can choose Collections and Edulastic Certified to find all our vetted content just like in the item bank. Here, you will find many different state tests like the Ohio Department of Education, the STAR test, or the LEAP assessment, which is from Louisiana. Feel free to scroll through the list and find any of the assessments you need. Remember, you can also set the filters like grade, subject, and standard set, and this would help you find your particular state test based on your particular state standard set. Beyond the entire library, I have the Authored by Me section, and this is where I'll find any of my pre-made assessments. If you don't find your assessments here, you might need to clear all filters if you have the Edulastic Certified filter above. You'll also have your Shared with Me, and this is where you or your colleagues can find their assessments that were personally shared to just them. I am a co-author is where you'll find your co-author assessments. Remember, this is specific for premium users. And finally, if you want to find any of your favorited assessments, which is done by clicking on the heart icon of any published assessment, you can do so here. While I'm in Authored by Me, I can choose to assign any of my published assessments or edit any of my in-draft assessments. I also have the More button, which would allow me to clone the assessment to make any changes if I need to make a modified assessment for students with IEPs. I also have the ability to delete the assessment if I no longer need to use it. However, if I'm just looking to assign, I'll find a published assessment and I'll click the Assign button. Now that I'm on the Assign screen, I need to choose who gets this assessment. And I can do that by this class group section here. The group section is specific for premium users, so I'll just cover class here. I'll go ahead and assign it to my Algebra 3 Period 2 class. If I need to assign this to individual students, I can click on Students and select them here. If I need to assign it to the entire class, there's no need to fill out this information. Now that I've chosen who gets it, I need to choose when they get it. Premium users will have the ability to use an open, due, and close date. This would set the due date for students to complete the assessment by, but not close it until a later date that you choose. As a free user, I'll go ahead and leave open date as is and change the close date. I'd like to set it out to 2 weeks, as this gives enough time for my students to finish the test. I might want this done beforehand, but if I have any students with excessive absences, or if there is a fire drill or something else that causes this assessment not to be done at the right time, this will make sure that it doesn't close on them. You can also choose to open the assessment manually or close the assessment manually as needed. This will give the most flexibility in when the students can see the assessment and when they can't. Test type could be class assessment or practice assessment. Practice assessment will still give you the grades, but would allow you to filter those assessments out. This would be good for homework assessments or pre-tests. If you're a premium user and you've already set up the settings when creating the assessment, you can find those settings in this location. Once I've chosen all of my settings and I've made sure everything looks right, I just simply click Assign. Clicking on Assign will give me the ability to share this assessment if I have not already. I also have the ability to share this assessment to Google Classroom, giving my students easy access from Google Classroom to access that assessment. If the students are taking the test now, I can go straight to the live classboard. Before going to the live classboard, we can go to the Assignments tab to status track our assessments. We can also go to the live classboard directly from Assignments. The Assignments tab will show me a list of assessments, and these assessments are the ones that are assigned to my classes. I can learn more about an assessment by clicking on it, and it will expand the rows to show me which class has been assigned and give me some status tracking information. You will want to pay special attention to these last 3 columns. Status will help us understand if the assessment is opened or closed. In this case, this says done, and this tells me that the assessment is closed. I can learn more about status and how to manage those assessments by going to YouTube, searching Edulastic Managing Assessments. With the status saying done, it's important that I move to the right and still check my submitted and graded numbers. As you'll see, this assessment is closed. However, only 1 student out of 9 total students that were assigned this assessment has actually submitted it, and that 1 student was graded. This tells me that the other 8 students do not have access to this assessment, and I need to make sure that I redirect it to them or reopen the assessment. To go directly to the live classboard, I simply just click the live classboard icon here. Once on the live classboard, you'll see the bar graph build in real time as students answer questions on this assessment. The bar graph is organized by question number and color-coded here to reflect the correctness of the responses provided by the students. You can find the overall class score located over here on the left side of the live classboard. Now that the students have taken the test, the teacher can drill down to get response level data by clicking on the bar graph of the question you're interested in. The teacher is taken to all of the student answers for that particular item. The teacher can scroll down to see each student's answer on this particular item, or click on the student's initials to see the student's answers. The teacher can also leave feedback or manually change the score here. At the top of this screen, you'll see a question drop-down box. This allows you to quickly shuffle to the next question. To get back to the main screen, simply click Card View. Back on the main screen, you could drill down to an individual student's responses by clicking on their name here. You can see all of the students' responses by scrolling down, leaving feedback and changing the score as needed. You can also drill down by the correctness of the student's responses. At the top right, you'll be able to use the drop-down to quickly move to the next student. Premium users will notice we have an Express Grader. This is the tabular view of the same data. It's broken down by student, giving their overall scores here. It will also give their responses and individual question scores here. In the Express Grader, teachers can modify or add scores as needed. This will also work well if you give this assessment on paper and you need to load in the student responses or data manually. To change a student's response or score, simply click the box. From here, select Edit Response and choose the student's response. Also, you can change their score right here. When you're done, use the arrow keys to move to the next question or the next student, clicking Exit when done. Moving to the free standards-based report here, I'll get an idea of what standards were on my test, what question was tracking that standard, and the overall mastery summary. You'll see on question number 1 and question 2, in these standards, that the student scored at 100% performance. Question 4, in this particular standard, the student scored at a 50%, and finally, 25% on the last question. Now, if I were to click on that 25%, I will actually get the students' scores. So that way I have an understanding of which students were struggling on that particular question and standard. The last tab on an assessment is the Settings tab. This is where you can update the close date if the assessment is still opened. This would allow you to extend the due date if needed. You can also choose to release the scores here, but you can always click on the three dots and release the scores here. Finally, the report card option generates a print-friendly file with a summary for each student to take home. Teachers can choose from several categories of information to include in the summary. Back on the live classboard, you'll see some additional options on the right, as well as the three dot options at the top. Let's start with print. Print will allow you to select all students or choose individual students to print their test results. You could choose between complete test, custom test, or if you had manually graded items, to print out only the manually graded items. You also have the redirect button, and the redirect button would allow you to reopen the assessment for students. This will be important if you have any students that did not take the assessment before the window closed and they're marked as absent, or if a student scored a less than proficient score and you needed to remediate and give them a retake. You will know if a student has taken a redirect by this icon right here. I can hover over the performance at the bottom to see their most recent 3 attempts. This will help me quickly put grades into the gradebook. I also have the More options over here. This allows me to mark students as submitted if I wanted them to take this assessment on paper. Premium users will have the ability to mark students as absent, and this will pause the assessment or take away access for an individual student, rather than needing to close or pause the test for the entire class. You can also choose to use the Add Students button, and this Add Students button is how you need to add students who have recently been added to your roster. In this case, I only have 4 students here, and I know I have 2 more, so I'll go ahead and choose Add Students, select those students, and then add them to the class. Now that I have a couple of students who are in progress on this test, I have the options pop up to pause or close the assessment. If you pause the assessment, you're taking away access temporarily, and you're able to reopen the assessment for all students at once. If you close the assessment, you're taking away access, and you're required to redirect to students to reopen the assessment for them. Up at the top, I have my 3 dots, and this is where I can change if I want to release scores or not. I can also choose to unassign an assessment, but you only want to unassign if there's no student data. Unassigning will remove the data permanently. This data is not recoverable. Outside of the live class board, premium teachers also have the ability to look at their gradebook. This gradebook will show the student scores across multiple tests that will look similar to a district gradebook, making it easier to track student data. You can create student groups from this location as well. If you need to access some test results, Go ahead and click on the percentage and it'll take you right to the live class board. More premium reports can be found in the reports here. In reports, premium users will have access to the single assessment report, multiple assessment report, standards mastery report, and student profile report. Free teachers will have the standards gradebook report. This report will give student proficiency on standards across multiple assessments. The single assessment report is best used to do a deep dive on an individual assessment. Multiple assessment reports will show data across multiple assessments, giving you an idea of how students are progressing throughout the year. The Standards Mastery Report will take a look at the standards over time across multiple assessments to get an idea of how students are performing on those standards. Finally, the Student Profile Report is a great report for teachers to print out to send home to parents. These reports will be individual breakdowns of student performance across domains, standards, or across the assessments they've taken. We'll go ahead and just take a look at Single Assessment Report so we have an idea of what's available to us. I'll click on the Assessment Summary. From Assessment Summary, I get an overview of this assessment. It gives me the average score, the percentage, the amount of students assigned, and the amount of students that were graded. I can compare across multiple classes, or I can use filters to search for specific assessments. I can choose to fill out any of these filters to filter my information down. But keep in mind, just like the item bank in the test library, the more filters you choose, the less results you'll get. If you've created any student groups that track student data, you could filter that group here in the Groups field. You can quickly navigate to any of the single assessment reports by clicking on any of the tabs at the top. These reports are quick to load and have plenty of information. Be sure to check out the Help Center to learn more information about these reports. If you need to print or download these results, you can do so at the top right using the printer icon or the download to CSV icon. When looking in reports and trying to filter down to a specific assessment, make sure that the assessment is closed and that students are graded. This process will make sure that the data flows into the reports and I've logged in as a student here, and this is the very first thing I see. It's called Assignments, just like the teacher's account. The Assignments tab for the students shows the most recently assigned assessments. The Assignments tab will show students what assessments are assigned to them. It'll give them important information like when it's due, if it's a timed test for premium users, and the status of that test. In this case, it's not started. The students also have grade navigation options just like the teacher. However, there's less options because there's less for them to do. They either take a test, look at their results, or add themselves to a teacher roster using the class code provided. In this case, I'll go ahead and click Start Assignment so we can see Edulastic from the student perspective. When I click Start Assignment, I have a message pop up automatically that tells me I have 10 minutes to take this test, and that's because my teacher, a premium user, has set a time limit. If a premium user decided to use test instructions, that message would also appear here. I'll go ahead and continue. Now, it'll ask me to enter the password. This is for both static and dynamic passwords. In this case, I use a static password, and I'll go ahead and enter that now. I'll click Start, and now it will take me into the test. This particular student has a lot of different options available to them because the teacher is a premium user. We'll start in the green navigation bar at the top. The student has the ability to choose from a drop-down menu to go to different questions. Students can also use the next button or the arrow on the side of the screen to move to the next item. If the teacher has chosen to allow students to check their answer, they'll also have that option here. And that will allow the student to choose an answer and then check to see if they got it correct or incorrect. If a student is unsure about their answer, they have the ability to bookmark it, and that will allow them to come back to this item later. On this particular test, The premium teacher has chosen to use a calculator. They've only used the basic calculator, but they could have given me the scientific or graphing calculator. Also, a premium feature is the cross-out option, and this allows students to cross out options to use deductive reasoning skills that they would have used on paper. There's also the scratchpad option, and this would allow students to show their work and then click it again to select their answer. That work would automatically be sent to the teacher. Also, a premium feature is the accessibility tool of magnifying. Magnify would give a box to the students that they can click and drag to see specific information magnified. At the top right, I have my timer telling me how much time I have left on this test. To the right of that is more accessibility features, like the ability to change the color contrast, which is pretty common on state tests. You can also choose to zoom. I'll go ahead and change the color contrast back so this is easier to see. This particular student was given text-to-speech by a premium teacher, and that allows the student to click play to listen to the question and answer choices being read to them. The student moves to the next option by clicking the arrow or next. If they click that arrow and they did not select any answers on that particular question, a warning will appear telling them you have not answered this question. And this warning is going to be especially helpful on multi-part questions, where they might need to scroll down to see more of the question. In this case, I'll go ahead and close and just choose a couple options. As I continue moving along, I'll go ahead and submit my responses. The student will get a review and submit screen. This will tell students if they've answered the questions, skipped the questions, or if they've bookmarked any questions. The student can quickly navigate back to any question by clicking on it.